The wagon wheels creaked across the sunburned plains as an Irish immigrant family moved west, chasing a future they barely understood. Their youngest daughter, Kate Higgins, stared at the horizon with a mix of fear and curiosity, unaware her life was about to split in two. In the 1860s Southwest, peace was fragile, broken by settlers pushing deeper into lands they did not know. One morning, dust rose on the horizon, horsemen approaching fast, silent as shadows sliding over stone. Apache riders swept down with the speed of a desert storm, scattering the family in a whirlwind of shouts and terror. Shots cracked across the open country, but the fight lasted only moments before the wagons fell silent. In the confusion, Kate was lifted onto a horse, carried away before fear even found its voice. She clung to the rider's waist as the world behind her disappeared into dust and memory. The Apache warriors did not harm her. Instead, they rode hard toward distant canyons, where the air cooled and the land folded into red stone. Kate's tears dried on her cheeks as she realized she was no longer a frontier girl. She was now part of a world she had never imagined. Among the Apache, her arrival sparked debate. Was she a captive, a burden, or something the spirits themselves had sent? Elders studied her with thoughtful eyes, sensing a spark of resilience beneath her trembling hands. Kate watched them with the same careful attention, trying to understand every gesture, every silence. She expected cruelty, but instead found patience, women offering food, water, and soft words she could not yet translate. As days passed, she learned her new life would not be shaped by fear, but by adaptation. The Apache called her a name, she would grow into Kéts'íí, the small fire that refuses to die. Kate learned their rhythms, the hush before sunrise, the laughter of children, the slow gathering of warriors planning hunts. In the canyon's sheltering walls, she discovered a strange feeling she had never expected. Safety. She did not know it yet, but the desert had chosen her, and the path of her life had shifted forever. The girl taken in a rush of hooves was beginning the long journey toward becoming battlefield Kate, a warrior unlike any the frontier had ever seen. Kate woke each morning to the smell of mesquite smoke drifting through the canyon like a quiet blessing. Apache women taught her how to grind corn, weave yucca fibers, and gather water from hidden springs carved into stone. Though she understood few words, she learned by watching hands, faces, and the rhythm of every task. Children her age treated her with curiosity at first, testing the strength of the strange pale girl in their games. Soon they found she ran faster than most of them and laughed with a fire that matched her name. Kate followed the elders into the high desert, learning plants that healed wounds, soothed fevers, and quieted pain. Her tongue stumbled over Apache words at first, but her determination brought smiles to even the sternest warriors. Every sunrise, she sat beside an elderly woman named Kéts'íí who told stories with gestures and skyward glances. From Kéts'íí, she learned that every rock, canyon, and wind carried a lesson if one listened closely. Kate began to understand that the Apache world was not wild, it was alive, connected, and deeply intelligent. The men sparred in the distance, their movements fluid and fast, and Kate watched them with a growing fascination. One warrior named Chens, known for his quiet strength, noticed her interest and began teaching her small lessons. He showed her how to move silently across gravel without leaving a whisper of sound. He taught her where the wind hid its secrets and how shadows could be used as allies. Kate learned to read tracks deer rabbit and the faint prints of men trying to erase their footprints. Her hands grew stronger, her feet tougher, her senses sharper than she had ever known. She discovered that the Apache did not break children into obedience, they shaped them into resilience. When she helped carry wood or returned from gathering with full baskets, the women praised her with warm pride. Kate realized she no longer felt like a captive. She felt like a daughter being raised by a new world. The girl who had once cried for home now looked out across the desert and felt its vastness settling gently into her bones. By the time she spoke her first full Apache sentence, the entire village cheered as if they had always been waiting for her voice. Kate Higgins was fading into memory, Kéts'íí was beginning to bloom. Kéts'íí's first lessons in warrior training came not from weapons, but from the silence of the land itself. Chens taught her to stand still enough that lizards came to rest near her feet, believing she was part of the earth. She learned how to use the clouds to predict storms and how to read the wind like a messenger carrying distant warnings. Kate practiced stepping so lightly that even dry twigs beneath her moccasins refused to crack. At night, she ran with the older children across the canyon floor, learning to keep her breath steady and her stride relentless. Soon, she could climb rock faces faster than boys who had grown up in the canyon since birth. Chen's placed a bow in her hands, guiding her fingers with patient precision as she learned to pull the string without trembling. Her first attempts were clumsy, but each arrow flew closer to the mark than the last. The women laughed softly at her stubborn focus, calling her the girl who hates missing. Kate's arms grew stronger, her aim truer, and with each success she felt a piece of her old fear fall away. She learned that Apache warriors moved not with rage, but with calm minds and clear intention. Chen's taught her how to listen for hoofbeats hidden beneath wind, or the faint clatter of a distant canteen. She trained at dawn, her breath misting in the cold air, her eyes fixed on targets painted on bark. As she grew older, she began accompanying hunting parties, carrying water, and learning to track without hesitation. Kate watched how warriors communicated with gestures instead of words, using the quiet itself as language. She learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to walk toward danger with steady steps. One evening, Chen's placed a decorated rawhide band around her wrist, signifying her acceptance into the warrior path. The village gathered around the fire and celebrated her progress with songs that echoed against the canyon walls. Kate felt a warmth she had never known, a sense of belonging that wrapped around her like a second skin. Her past life on the wagon trail seemed like a distant dream, fading beneath the glow of her new identity. By the end of that summer, Kate had become more Apache than immigrant, more warrior than child. The desert had reshaped her, and the fire within her burned brighter than ever. The first sign of danger came with the thunder of distant hooves trembling through the canyon floor. Kate looked up from gathering wood and felt a cold ripple move through her spine. Warriors climbed the ridges, scanning the horizon where dust lifted like a pale ghost behind the mountains. Chen's jaw tightened as he recognized the formation: U.S. cavalry riders, the bluecoats, moving fast and without warning. Kate had seen soldiers before, but never riding toward her new home with rifles glinting in the sun. Women gathered children and supplies while warriors positioned themselves along the canyon walls, like shadows waiting to move. The Apache did not fight unless they had no choice, but this day, the choice was taken from them. Kate climbed a narrow rock shelf, her heart pounding as she watched the bluecoats draw closer. She could see their faces grim, determined, ready to force the land to bend to their orders. The cavalry halted near the canyon mouth, shouting demands that echoed like cracks of thunder. The Apache answered with silence, the kind that carried centuries of resistance in its stillness. Then an officer fired a warning shot into the air, a mistake as loud as it was foolish. The canyon erupted with motion arrows, dust, war cries slicing through the hot wind. Kate watched the warriors move with precision, their bodies flowing like the very desert they defended. She felt torn between fear and the fierce loyalty that now bound her to the people who had become her family. Her hands trembled as she held a bow, not yet drawing it, simply feeling the weight of what it meant. The soldiers pushed forward, but the canyon's twists and shadows swallowed them, turning their formation into confusion. Kate saw one bluecoat slip from his horse as an arrow struck his shoulder, and she realized the battlefield was no longer distant, it was at her feet. Chen signaled for her to retreat to the inner cliffs, but she refused, stepping beside him with a steadiness that surprised even herself. The Apache withdrew deeper into the canyon, drawing the cavalry into terrain where only they could move freely. Kate followed them, her blood burning with a clarity she had never known, understanding that this moment would change her forever. By sunset, the bluecoats retreated, battered and shaken, leaving dust and silence in their wake. Kate stood among the warriors, bruised, breathless, and irrevocably transformed. The fight had awakened the fire she was named for. That night, the canyon glowed with torchlight, as the Apache tended to the wounded and prepared for what the next dawn might bring. Kate knelt beside a young warrior with an arrow lodged in his arm, helping Yazzie grind ibers into a healing paste. Her hands were steady now, guided by instinct instead of fear, moving with a confidence she had earned over years. Chance had watched her quietly, recognizing the courage growing inside her like a flame refusing to be smothered. The elders gathered around the fire, discussing the bluecoats' intentions and the likelihood of their return. Kate listened, absorbing every word, her mind stitching together strategy, terrain, and the warrior's cautious wisdom. When an elder asked who first spotted the cavalry, Kate stepped forward and explained every detail she had seen. Her clarity surprised them, her voice carrying the calm weight of someone who had watched death approach without turning away. The warriors nodded, acknowledging her place among them not as a child, but as someone whose eyes saw true. Chen's placed a bow in her hands again, urging her to practice until the moon sat high above the canyon rim. Arrow after arrow flew into the darkness, each one closer to the target than the last, each one burning away the last of her old life. Kate realized she no longer felt like an outsider defending a borrowed home. She felt like a protector of her own people. The Apache understood that strength came in many forms, and they honored the fire that rose in her heart. Women braided her hair tightly so it would not fall in her eyes, marking her readiness for the path ahead. The next morning, she awoke with a sense of clarity, as if the desert itself had whispered her destiny into her ear. Kate spent the day learning hand signals used during hunts and battles, practicing until her arms ached and her breath came short. She learned how to roll from cover to cover, how to use shadows as shields, how to move unseen even in open country. The more she trained, the more she felt the land itself shifting beneath her feet, accepting her as one of its daughters. By evening, she stood on a ridge, overlooking the endless desert, watching the sky blaze with colors that mirrored her growing spirit. Kate Higgins had been carried into this world by force, but Kate, as the small fire, had chosen to stay. She did not yet know what battles awaited her, only that she would meet them with a warrior's heart and a daughter's loyalty. The flame inside her had become her compass, and it pointed toward a future shaped by courage, not fear. The months that followed brought rumors that spread faster than wind across the plains. Traders whispered that more bluecoats were coming, riding alongside something new and terrible long metal tracks creeping across Apache land. Kate listened with unease as she learned about the Iron Horse, the railroad slicing through territories older than any nation. To the Apache, it was not just a machine, it was a warning that the world was changing faster than arrows could fly. Chensk explained that once the Iron Horse came, soldiers and settlers would follow in waves too large to stop. Kate felt the weight of that truth settle in her bones, a cold reminder that the peace of her canyon was fragile. Scouts returned with reports of surveyors setting stakes in the earth, marking land as if it were theirs to claim. The Apache watched from ridgelines as crews hammered steel into the ground, their actions echoing like distant thunder. Kate saw the determination in the workers' faces and recognized the same hunger that had driven countless families west. But she also saw the arrogance, the belief that the land was empty simply because they could not see its spirit. Chen warned the people that conflict was coming, not from hatred, but from the world narrowing around them. The Apache prepared quietly, gathering supplies, mapping safe routes, and sending runners to nearby bands. Kate trained harder than ever, mastering the art of moving faster than sight, quieter than breath. She learned to read railroad maps, understanding how routes bent around rivers and cliffs, information warriors could use. One evening, scouts signaled from the ridgeline. A mounted patrol of bluecoats was approaching the canyon again. The village reacted swiftly, moving children and elders into hidden alcoves known only to those born of the desert. Kate helped guide them, her voice steady, her movements sharp with purpose. Then she returned to the warriors, standing beside Chen's as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched long. This time, Kate felt no fear, only the fierce love of someone defending a home she had earned through fire and loyalty. The cavalry rode closer, unaware that watchful eyes tracked their every step from cliffs and brush. Kate drew her bow and breathed deeply, ready to defend the land that had taken her in when the world she was born to had cast her aside. The shadows of the Iron Horse stretched over the desert, but the people of the canyon were not ready to surrender. The evening sun turned the desert blood red, as the bluecoats reached the canyon mouth with rifles angled toward the ridges. Kate crouched beside Chen's, her breath steady, her eyes sharp as she studied the soldiers' formation. The Apache had chosen their ground, narrow paths, hidden ledges, and choke points carved by centuries of wind. Silence fell over the canyon, the kind that makes even birds refuse to sing. When the first soldier shouted a command, dust lifted around his boots like a warning rising from the earth. Kate released an arrow that struck the ground before him, a deliberate miss meant to send a message. Turn back. The bluecoats hesitated, confused by the lone arrow whispering danger into their ranks. Chen signaled, and Apache warriors began to appear along the cliffs like spirits stepping out of stone. Yet the soldiers pushed forward, driven by orders from faraway men who had never seen this land. The first shots cracked through the canyon, echoing like thunder trapped between walls of firelit rock. Kate moved with speed and precision, rolling behind boulders and emerging with her bow already drawn. Arrows flew from every direction, striking the ground near the soldiers' feet, guiding them into a trap rather than killing them. The Apache fought to protect, not to slaughter, hoping fear alone might drive the intruders away. But a young soldier panicked and fired blindly up the ridge. the bullet whining past Kate's ear like a wasp of steel. The canyon erupted as warriors responded with full force, the air thick with dust and the sharp smell of gunpowder. Kate sprinted along a narrow ledge, using the height to flank the soldiers who struggled to aim upward. Chen's shouted commands that bounced along the rock face, guiding warriors like a river guides its current. Kate's arrows struck reins, boots, and rifle stocks, her aim precise enough to disable rather than destroy. At last, the bluecoats began retreating, dragging their wounded and leaving behind gear that clattered across the stone. The sky glowed red with the last light of day as the Apache pushed them back toward open plains. Kate watched them flee, her chest heaving, her arms trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. For the second time, she had stood against soldiers of the empire that had claimed her birth, family, and she had not broken. The warriors gathered around her as the sky darkened, murmuring approval, pride, and the deep respect earned only in battle. Under the red sky, Kéts'íí had proven herself a warrior not by blood, but by courage. The canyon walls, still warm from the fight, seemed to whisper her name. Weeks passed after the battle, and a strange quiet settled over the canyon like dust after a storm. Kate felt the shift in the air, sensing that the world beyond Apache lands was tightening its grip. Scouts brought word of new forts rising along the railroad line, each one a nail driven deeper into the desert's heart. Kate sat alone on a ridge at dawn, torn between the family she had found and the blood she had been born with. Her Irish memories flickered faces she could barely recall, a mother's laugh lost to time, a father's calloused hands on the wagon reins. Yet her spirit felt Apache, shaped by the land, the fire, the people who had taught her how to live. Chenzé approached quietly, knowing without asking what weighed on her thoughts. He reminded her that a warrior's path was not determined by blood, but by who she chose to stand beside when danger came. Kate realized that both worlds lived within her, one by birth, one by the fire that raised her. Rumors spread of peace talks failing and new cavalry units preparing to sweep through Apache lands. Some families considered moving deeper into the mountains, away from the encroaching wave of settlers and soldiers. Kate listened to the debates, feeling the urgency in every voice, the fear in every quiet glance. She wanted to protect the canyon that had become her home, yet she wondered what price the future would demand. One night, she dreamed of her mother singing, but the song shifted into the windswept chants of Apache warriors. She awoke with tears on her cheeks, realizing that she carried two histories, neither of which she could erase. Yazi placed her hands on Kate's shoulders and told her that the land itself had adopted her, and the land never let go. Kate felt a surge of strength, knowing that she did not need to choose between worlds, she could honor both. Scouts arrived at dawn with news that the bluecoats were gathering again, this time in greater numbers. The canyon buzzed with preparation, yet the fear was deeper now, threaded through with exhaustion. Kate stood beside Chen's, her bow in hand, her heart steady, ready to defend what she loved regardless of the cost. She understood now that the path of two worlds was not a curse, but a responsibility. The desert wind swept past her, carrying both her names Kate Higgins and Kéts'íí into the rising sun. Whichever name the future remembered, she intended to earn it with honor. Dawn broke pale and cold as word spread through the canyon that the bluecoats were closer than ever before. Warriors gathered their weapons with grim understanding this time. The soldiers were not coming to warn or scout. They were coming to clear the land, to make way for the railroad and the future it carried like a steel blade. Kate felt the weight of inevitability settle on her shoulders, heavier than any bow she had ever held. She stood beside Chen's as the warriors formed a defensive line, each man and woman prepared to fight for their home. The desert wind cut across the canyon, carrying the distant clatter of hooves and metal like a storm rolling in. Kate tightened the rawhide band on her wrist, the symbol of the path she had chosen, and breathed deeply. When the bluecoats appeared at the canyon mouth, their formation was large, disciplined, and unmistakably determined. Their officer shouted demands for surrender, but the canyon answered with the silence of a people who refused to disappear. Kate stepped forward, bow in hand, her heart steady as she met the officer's stare from across the distance. She knew he saw only an Irish girl standing among Apache warriors, but she had long since left that identity behind. The first shot cracked through the stillness, fired by a nervous soldier who mistook a shadow for movement. The battle ignited instantly, arrows and bullets trading places in a storm of dust and screaming metal. Kate moved through the chaos like a flame darting between rocks, releasing arrows with deadly precision. She aimed for rifles, reins, and hands, disrupting the soldiers' rhythm and breaking their control. Chens fought at her side, every motion of his body a testament to a lifetime shaped by survival. The canyon roared with battle cries, hoofbeats, and the echoing thunder of rifle fire ricocheting off stone. Kate felt a burning line slice across her shoulder as a bullet grazed her, but she refused to fall back. She saw the officer raise his pistol at Chens, and without hesitation, she loosed an arrow that struck the ground before him. The officer flinched, buying Chens a heartbeat of life, but the soldiers pressed ever deeper into the canyon. Warriors fell back to higher ground, regrouping as the fight intensified into a desperate struggle. Kate took her place on a narrow ledge, firing down at riders who tried to push through the bottleneck of stone. Her movements were fierce, fluid, and fearless, the culmination of every lesson the desert had carved into her. As the sun dipped behind the cliffs, the battle reached its fever pitch, each side determined to outlast the other. Kate's arms were trembling, her breath sharp, her vision tunneling into pure instinct. She knew this fight was not about victory, it was about existence, identity, and the land that had become her blood. When the final charge of the bluecoats broke against the canyon's defenses, they retreated, battered, defeated, and shaken. Kate collapsed to her knees, breathless, bloodied, but unbroken, surrounded by warriors who saw her not as foreign, but as one of their own. In the fading light, the Apache whispered her name with reverence: Kéts'íí, the fire that would not die. Her last stand had not been about proving herself, it had been about protecting the family that had saved her. The canyon was quiet in the days after the battle, the kind of quiet that comes when a land exhales after surviving the impossible. Kate walked among her people, helping bury arrows, mend wounds, and comfort families whose warriors had not returned. Though her shoulder throbbed, she refused to rest until every task was done, every elder cared for, every child reassured. The Apache gathered to honor the bravery of those who fought, and Kate stood among them with her head held high. Kéts'íí placed a hand on her cheek, whispering that the spirits had woven her into the story of the people. Chensei told the council that Kate fought with the clarity of someone who saw not just danger, but destiny. The elders agreed that she had crossed the final threshold from outsider to daughter, from student to warrior. In a ceremony lit by torches and stars, Kate received a new rawhide band, marked with symbols of protection and courage. She felt the fire inside her Kéts'íí, the small flame grow into something steady and enduring. Stories of her bravery traveled to neighboring bands, spreading like sparks carried on desert wind. Some spoke of the Irish girl who became an Apache warrior. Others said she was a spirit walker born of two worlds. To the bluecoats, she became a myth, an elusive fighter whose arrows bent the tide of battle and vanished like smoke. Kate herself cared little for legends. She cared for the laughter of children, the strength of her people, and the land that had claimed her. Years passed, and the railroad carved deeper into the southwest, but the canyon remained a protected sanctuary. Kate guided families to safe trails, teaching younger warriors how to move like wind and listen like stone. She lived with purpose, not vengeance, helping her people survive the dawn of a new and difficult era. The desert shaped her into a bridge between cultures, a reminder that identity can be chosen, not only inherited. Some nights she sat alone beneath the stars, whispering thanks to both the mother who birthed her and the mother who raised her anew. Her name lived on after she was gone, carried by storytellers who spoke of the girl taken by force and returned by destiny. To the Apache, she would forever be Kéts'íí, the desert daughter, whose fire refused to die. And in the vast silence of the southwest, her spirit still rides the canyon, winds, fierce, free, and unforgettable.